Human beings are not all the same, but there are some rules that govern most of our behaviors. In his book Laws of Human Nature, Robert Greene gives us 18 laws to understand humanity better. And in this video, I will be giving you a brief summary of all the points. And I promise you, if you make it to the end of this video, you will be looking at people with an X-ray vision and understand them better than you ever did before. Law number 1, Law of Irrationality. Just a few years ago, there was a massive surge in the price and popularity of Bitcoin. If you had asked anyone who was buying Bitcoin at that time about why they were doing it, they would try and make it sound like it was a rational decision. Oh, it's the technology, it's the market, etc. All these people thought that they were making a rational decision. And then suddenly, the price started to plummet. A lot of them sold their Bitcoins at a loss, and then they wondered where they went wrong. Well, the problem was that both the decision to buy and to sell was irrational. And people do a similar thing in the stock market. They hear from someone that XYZ stock is going to go up and they buy it without thinking. Now, I'm not making a statement about Bitcoin or stocks here. Bitcoin may very well be the future. What I am saying is that people are fundamentally irrational, and we only fool ourselves to think that we are rational. Most people who bought the hype only did so because they were lured in by easy money, and that made them irrational. Law number 2, Law of Narcissism. When most people first met Joseph Stalin, they would describe him to be very charming. He seemed like a very nice person, and he would encourage everyone to talk freely. When you would speak to him, he would pay such close attention to you that you would feel honored that he was even listening to you. A lot of people who worked with him in his early years would say that once they met him, they would be anxious to see him again because he made you feel like there was a bond between you two. And yet this was the same guy who in his later years was responsible for millions of deaths, directly and indirectly, and at one point he had all of his closest friends assassinated. According to Robert Greene, Joseph Stalin was a complete control narcissist. People like him view themselves as the center of the universe, and they have a very high sense of self. These people, especially if they're also talented, can be entrepreneurs, politicians, leaders, etc. However, almost always, the people who are the closest to them end up getting burned. Now, while these kinds of people are actually rare in the world, we should know who they are and we should stay as far away from them as possible. But apart from that, Robert Greene also tells us that everyone is a little bit narcissistic nowadays. We all tend to think a little highly of ourselves, and this is increasing even more due to social media, where if you get a few thousand followers, you begin to think that you are more important than you actually are. To balance this, we all need to practice more empathy. Law number 3, Law of Role Playing. All humans are in some way actors. We learn from a very young age about which facial expressions and sounds we make will get us the things we want from our parents. As we grow older, we internalize a lot of these actions, and then they become a part of who we present ourselves to be. So in a way, all humans wear masks. Masks that show us in the best possible light. Now, if you take this mask to be true, you will never be able to understand most people's nature. Instead, you must develop the ability to see through people's masks and recognize them for who they really are. Robert Greene basically talks about reading people's unconscious body language. People betray their true feelings and unconscious desires all the time through non-verbal cues that they cannot completely control, like facial expressions, vocal inflections, nervous tics, etc. Law number 4, Law of Compulsive Behaviour. Howard Hughes was a very anxious but sweet boy who was completely doted on by his mother. He was very polite and all smiles, and basically a model child. However, his mother died very early, and a couple of years later his father also passed away. His parents left behind a vast fortune, and he was suddenly in control of an entire company. His disposition suddenly changed, and he became angry and rude, and bought back all the shares in his company from his other relatives and kicked them out. He was determined to be independent, so he moved to LA and started a film studio using the money he had. He started shooting his very first movie, and all of the people who were working on the movie realized what a pain he was to work with. He was very controlling and did not let the director make creative decisions. Everything had to go through him. Eventually, he fired the director and decided to direct the movie himself. Surprisingly, that movie ended up being a success at the box office, and the legend of the great Howard Hughes was born. He even started an aviation company as a hobby and managed to charm the people in the government and scored a contract to make photo reconnaissance planes. However, the same problems remained with his attitude, and his company was a mess. Everyone in the company hated working for him, and the general managers kept quitting because he would always undermine their authority. Ultimately, he was not able to fulfill the contract. He still managed to get himself another contract later on. However, he wasn't able to fulfill that either, and his company lost around $90 million. He eventually died in an airplane accident, and in the autopsy it was revealed that he was hopelessly addicted to drugs, and he tried to keep this hidden from everyone else. In short, the man had a poor character right from the start. Robert Greene tells us that the strength of someone's character comes from within the core of someone's personality. It comes from genetics, good parenting, mentors along the way, and continuous improvement. Our character can lead us to behave in compulsive ways. For example, if someone has a poor character with regards to infidelity, don't be surprised if you're dating them and they end up cheating on you. You have to learn to see past the charm and the facade that people show you, and look at people's past history, their decisions, the way they handle themselves to figure out the strength of their character. Law 5. The Law of Covetousness. Gabrielle Chanel was a young girl in France whose mother died pretty early. Her father then abandoned her and sent her to a convent. At the age of 18, she left the convent for a boarding school where she started training for a career as a seamstress. There she quickly became disinterested in what she was doing and discovered a new passion, which was acting. She loved how anyone could become someone else on stage. She took up the stage name Coco and tried acting, singing, etc. However, she soon realized that she didn't have the talent to make it big. She then stumbled onto another career path. A lot of failed actresses would become courtesans and would be supported by wealthy lovers. They would live in big houses, wear fancy dresses, and while society would look down upon them, at least they were living glamorous lives. A man named Balzan invited her to become a courtesan, and she accepted. She still wasn't satisfied with her life and yearned for something more. One day she stumbled into Balzan's bedroom and started to wear some of his men's clothes. She matched them with some of her own clothes and made different outfits. This was a style that didn't exist for women at the time. A new androgynous yet attractive style, and all the other courtesans wanted these new outfits. Soon she met another man, Arthur Capel, who connected her with aristocratic women. They loved her new outfits, and she moved to Paris and began selling them. Everything she now did became a trend. People just couldn't get enough of whatever she designed. And long story short, the brand Coco Chanel that you now see everywhere was born. Chanel was able to focus on what other women desired. She was able to understand the repressed desires and fantasies. That is part of human nature, and those who can understand this can use it to their benefit. Law 6. Law of shortsightedness. Have you ever seen people who always complain about how bad the world is turning? They see a couple of news stories and conclude that World War III is imminent or that we are indeed living in the end of times. You must have also seen people who are taken in by every single get-rich-quick scheme. They seem to be convinced that the stock they picked is the right stock, that an unknown cryptocurrency is going to be the future, and in general it seems like they have the inability to think long-term. Well, this is a fundamental part of human nature, being short-sighted. We should always strive to have a larger perspective. Instead of getting taken in by a few news stories, we should analyze history and understand the cycles in humanity. Unless you can elevate your perspective, you're always going to be reacting to the world, and you will be taken advantage of. Law 7. Law of defensiveness. From our childhood, we develop a defensive and self-protective part of our personality that we feel other people should not be allowed to violate. This later on becomes a big part of our identity. We don't ever want to feel coerced and manipulated into doing things we don't want. We want to feel like every choice we make is our own choice. We never want to allow this sense of self to be challenged, and that is usually for good reason. If every person that we meet can challenge our perception of ourselves, then we will be left with nothing. But sometimes we do drop our defenses and let other people in. It could be a night out drinking with the boys or a deep loving relationship. We do this because we don't feel judged and we feel like we can let our guard down. In order to truly connect with people, you have to inspire that same feeling of security in other people. If you can learn to do that, you will have tremendous influence over other people. Law 8. Law of Self Sabotage. Robert Greene gives us an example in the book that illustrates this law. Imagine that a young man goes to Paris. He is a bit introverted and doesn't know French, but he is genuinely excited at the thought of going there. Once he is there, he finds that the people aren't that friendly. He finds it hard to communicate with people. Even the tourist attractions don't make him feel better because they're so crowded. On the other hand, a young extroverted woman also goes to Paris. She's more extroverted and she doesn't mind that the people aren't friendly because she finds her own people wherever she goes. She loves French and tries to keep learning the language. She absolutely enjoys having a lot of people around her. Both of these people have very different experiences of the same city. It was the man's attitude that made the experience worse for him, not the city itself. We cannot underestimate the power our attitude has on sabotaging our lives and experiences. Therefore, we must always try to cultivate an attitude that helps us in life. Even if we exaggerate this point, it is a useful exaggeration because it only ends up in creating a positive, self-fulfilling prophecy. Law 9. The law of repression. Humans are social animals, and very early on we learn that there are certain emotions that are acceptable to show other people and certain emotions that must be repressed. So on the outside we become nice and cordial human beings, but on the inside, a lot of us have repressed parts of ourselves. Carl Jung calls this our shadow. Because of its repressed nature, many people don't even know it exists. It might leak out in a fit of rage, or when you're very upset and emotional. Robert Greene tells us that the key to becoming an authentic human is to integrate this part of your personality with the rest of you. Now, exactly how to do that is outside the scope of this video, but you should know that becoming authentic is one of the best ways we can genuinely attract people towards our real self. Law 10. Law of envy. Envy is one of the most complicated emotions to decode simply because most people don't really admit to feeling envy. However, envy is an integral part of human nature. We are always comparing ourselves to the people around us to know exactly where we stand in the pecking order. After all, we are social animals. The problem is that usually we are the most envious of the people around us, especially our friends. If you have friends that envy you, on the outside they may pretend to act like everything is okay, but secretly a lot of their actions towards you might be motivated by envy. You have to become a student of envy and spot an envy attack coming before it actually hits you. Moreover, you have to learn to remove envy in yourself by developing your own moral code by which you judge yourself, and not comparing yourself to others. Law 11. Law of Grandiosity. Have you ever played a video game like Call of Duty, and while destroying other people, you felt like an absolute god? That is the law of grandiosity at play. We can often let even a little bit of success get to our heads, and we start having grandiose visions of ourselves. We forget the role that luck played in our success. We forget the people who helped us along the way. So the more successful we become, the more superior we feel. It is imperative to cultivate a sense of humility on your way to success. Law 12. The law of gender rigidity. All of us have masculine and feminine qualities to our nature. According to Robert Greene, we can sometimes over-identify with the qualities we want to show the world and repress the other side of our personality. We must become comfortable with both our masculine and feminine qualities and cultivate a sense of balance to reach our fullest potential. Law 13. Law of aimlessness. Unlike animals who are mostly guided by their instincts, we humans have the ability to consciously choose our actions and make decisions for ourselves. Unfortunately, if these actions don't serve an overarching goal, we start to feel like it's all meaningless. Therefore, we all should strive to have a purpose that gives our actions meaning and makes us feel more fulfilled. Law 14. Law of Conformity. We don't want to be seen as not a part of the crowd, so we conform ourselves to whatever the groupthink is. However, this will end up dulling the part of ourselves that makes us unique and will rob the world of our unique gifts. What we have to learn to do is develop an intelligence within ourselves that lets us conform outwardly in a social setting, but on the inside, we are keenly self-aware and developing our own thoughts and ideas. This helps us get the best of both worlds. Law 15. Law of Fickleness. Being a leader is tricky. This is because most people are fickle. They want to be led, but they also want to be free. They want to worship the king, but they also want to kill him. If you want to be a leader, you have to learn how to perfect this balance. Now, I think Robert Greene's book 48 Laws of Power is much better at teaching you how to do this, and according to Robert, the earlier you learn how to do this in life, the better off you will be. Law 16. Law of Aggressiveness. Everyone has pent-up desires, and a lot of times it can make people more aggressive towards you. You have to learn how to spot aggression before it takes you by surprise. Also, you must learn how to channel your own aggression towards your goals, because this will give you an energy so potent that you can basically beat your goals into submission. Law 17. Law of Generational Myopia. Every generation wants to separate itself from the previous one. They might rebel against the established norms, but oftentimes they might be very predictable in their rebellion. This generational outlook can affect you more deeply than you think. Therefore, your job is to become an observer of this. Don't let your generational myopia blind you, because only then will you be able to exploit this for your own good, whether for business or just understanding the world around you much better. Law of 18. Law of Death Denial. Most people ignore the thought of their own deaths. However, what we should do is quite the opposite. Our own demise must always be on our minds, because then we can really drill down and understand what path we really want to go down on in the one life that we have. If you made it all the way to the end, I want to congratulate you for getting the keys to human nature. I highly recommend you also watch my summary on the 48 Laws of Power. If you liked the video, then click the like button and subscribe for more videos on self-improvement. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.